Alright, we're going to talk about the age of absolutism in Spain. Now, Spain is ruled by an absolute monarchy, and it was one of the most powerful and richest countries in the 15th century, as you might have already made the connection from our last unit, the Age of Exploration. Now, Spain had many colonies, and they were pretty well off from the New World's wealth. What I want to focus on in this unit is we're going to talk about Charles V and Philip II. Now, before I introduce Charles V, I want to give you a little background on how he's going to inherit the throne from King Ferdinand and Isabella of Spain, and how he will also inherit the Holy Roman Empire. Now, one family in particular that will keep popping up in the age of absolutism is the Habsburg family. They rule the Holy Roman Empire, which will be mostly Spain, the Netherlands, Austria, and pieces of Italy. Now, this family didn't get their lands by war. They never were very good generals. The Habsburgs married to get more land and power. Now, the Habsburgs also have very distinctive features, and that became more and more noticeable as cousins, maybe a little bit closer, tended to marry more than a few generations. Now, King Ferdinand and Isabella, who are most known for uniting Spain and sending Columbus off in 1492, had 6 children. All of them died very young, except 2 daughters. Catherine of Aragon was one of their daughters, who was the first wife of Henry VIII. He was the one that had 6 wives. He ended up divorcing her when she only bore him 1 daughter, Mary, who's going to later become Bloody Mary. And this is when Henry VIII creates his own church, the Anglican Church. Now, Ferdinand and Isabella's other daughter was Joanna of Castile, and she will have a very interesting nickname in history. Her nickname will be Joanna the Mad. Now, Joanna had been married off to an Austrian prince named Philip the Handsome of the Habsburg family, and Joanna was really attached to her husband. Obsessed might be a better word. And together they had a son named Charles, and they also had a son named Ferdinand. Now, poor little Charles witnessed his mother's bizarre behavior with his father. Now, tragically, his father, who is Philip the Handsome, is going to die when he was 6, and Joanna the Mad locked herself up with his dead corpse, basically. And obviously, she's not mentally capable of coping with her husband's death. Charles is going to be raised by his grandfather, Ferdinand, who didn't like a less than full-blooded Spaniard becoming the king. And he left his Holy Roman provinces to be governed by the Habsburg cousins, and he was not at first accepted by the Spaniards, but in 1516, when King Ferdinand died, he not only was the ruler of the Holy Roman Empire, but also the King of Spain, and thereby the ruler of the Spanish colonies in the Americas as well. Now, ruling 2 empires involved Charles V in constant warfare, which we're going to talk about. Now, Charles was ruling during the time of the Protestant Reformation, which we've already talked about, and he was a devout Catholic. He tried to suppress the movement of Protestantism, where you had Martin Luther, John Calvin, in the German states. And as long as Protestant princes were willing to fight for the empire, Charles V permitted religious freedom to some degree, but he sought to prevent the Protestant doctrines from spreading within his realms, because he believed that would lead to political dissension. After years of religious conflict, as you might already know, Charles V allowed the German princes to choose their own religion in the Peace of Augsburg in 1555. Now, Charles V struggled with the Protestant Reformation, but he's also going to struggle with the Muslim Ottoman Empire, which was based in Turkey, but stretched across the Balkans. Under Suleiman, Ottoman forces advanced across Central Europe to the walls surrounding Vienna, Austria, which happens to be in the Holy Roman Empire. Now, although Austria held firm during this siege, the Ottomans occupied much of Hungary, following their crushing victory at the Battle of Mohacs. Now, Ottoman naval forces also continued to challenge Spanish power in the Mediterranean, so this is another failure you see from Charles V. Now, with all these failures with the Protestant Reformation, with the Muslim Ottoman Empire, Charles V is going to find being king very cumbersome, okay? Maybe this is a little bit of depression from his mother's side, Joanna the Mad. Not to mention the empire is very scattered for one person to rule effectively. So Charles V decides to divide the empire to Ferdinand, his brother, where he gets Central Europe, and Philip, his son, who's later going to be Philip II. He gets Spain, Netherlands, and southern Italian states, while Charles decides to become a monk. Philip II is 29 years old when he took over for his father, and he will be ruling Spain for the next 42 years. Now, with the help of all the silver and gold his country was taking from Mexico and South America, he made himself absolute in power in Spain. Absolute means a ruler with complete authority over the government and the lives of the people. He also asserted that he ruled by divine right, which we are going to see is a persevering theme throughout Europe. Divine right means that he believes his authority to rule came directly from God. Now, Philip is also going to see himself as a guardian of the Roman Catholic Church. One of the greatest undertakings of his life was to defend the Catholic Reformation and turn back the Protestant tide. I'm going to talk about this a little bit later. Now, Philip II spent most of his time managing his government. He seldom hunted or jousted or did those kingly type things. He concentrated on making sure his control was complete. Now, historians also believe that Philip II lived almost like a monk. I'm going to start with the good parts of Philip II's reign because when given an option of good and bad, I'm sure you'd want to hear the good first. Now, there can be some good things that come from an absolute monarch. They are definitely sponsors of the arts. No one can tell them to put a cap on the spending. They could just spend however much they want, no limits, okay? So, like most absolute monarchs, Philip built the most beautiful castle, the Escorial, which is found in Madrid. Now, a famous artist that also emerges during this period is El Greco, which translates to the Greek, because he was born in Greece and studied in Italy before coming to Spain. His art later inspires artists in the 20th century, and he is considered the master of Spanish paintings. As you notice in his painting, he produces this haunting religious pictures, and that's mostly what his artwork looks like. And he also paints striking portraits of Spanish nobles. Another component of the Spanish Golden Age deals with Miguel de Cervantes and his literature. Cervantes tried to be a soldier, but he was captured by Muslim pirates and he was held for 5 years. He then got a job to get supplies for the Spanish Armada, but got arrested and jailed for embezzlement. Now, he also wrote 30 plays that never sold. So, he's going to live a life of hardship and adventure and poverty. Basically, he's a failure. But almost everyone has now heard of one of his works, Don Quixote. Alright, it pokes fun at medieval tales of chivalry and is considered to be Europe's first modern novel. In his pursuit of building and extending the Spanish power and producing this golden age, Philip had many tools. Okay, marriage is going to be one of his tools. Marriage was not for love or a partnership during this time. It was to get land, it was to get power, it was to produce sons to inherit. To build important alliances and to pacify potential enemies, he married a total of 4 times, gaining power and in some cases additional territory. Yet, these alliances aren't going to last very long because Renaissance women didn't live long enough. So Philip extended his empire through this way. At first, Philip married Maria of Portugal, who was his double cousin. They had one child who was extremely deformed, and then she ended up dying in childbirth. Next, he then married his biggest opponent, the Queen of England, which was Mary I at the time, who was also his cousin. Now, we've talked about Mary Tudor before. She's also known as Bloody Mary, and of course, she was Catholic at the time in England, which was mostly Protestant. So the two actually kind of got along because they were both defenders of the Catholic religion. They had no children, hence why Elizabeth I is going to come to the throne. We're going to talk about her later. Now, his third wife is Elizabeth of Valois, also of France. She was 14 at the time and he was going to be 59 when they married. Now, Between her age of 19 until she died at the age of 23, she had 5 pregnancies. Only 2 daughters ended up living, and it appears Philip actually kind of liked her. Now, wife number 4 is with his niece, Anna of Austria. Now, together, Philip and Anna of Austria are going to pop out 5 children, 4 being sons. She's going to end up dying at the age of 31 of a contagion. Now, with Philip II, he married a lot of his cousins, his nieces, his family members. This is not a rare thing. This is going to happen throughout the age of absolutism. They wanted to keep the bloodline pure. I'm going to talk about this a little later.
Nobody expects the Spanish Inquisition.
Now, besides having 4 wives throughout his reign, Philip II was the biggest advocate of the Spanish Inquisition. To ensure that Christianity alone was practiced, they created the Spanish Inquisition, which is an organization of priests that looked for and punished anyone in Spain suspected of practicing non-Christian religions. Now, Philip II turned to the Inquisition against Protestants and other people thought to be heretics. The Spanish Inquisition was ruthless in seeking Muslims and Jews as well. People found guilty of heresy, which is the failure to follow church beliefs, were sentenced in public, tortured, and killed. Many were burned to death. In total, the Spanish sentenced 2,000 people to die, while the Portuguese also put 1,400 to death. The number of people who died in the various inquisitions across Europe are difficult to determine, but the number of victims can be numbered in the thousands easily. Philip's going to advance Spanish Catholic power by fighting many wars. In the Mediterranean, the Ottoman Empire continued to pose a threat to European control of the region. At the Battle of Lepanto in 1571, Spain and its Italian allies soundly defeated an Ottoman fleet off the coast of Greece. Although the Ottoman Empire would remain a major power in the Mediterranean region for 3 more centuries, Christians still hailed the battle as a great victory and demonstration of Spain's power. Now, during the last half of his reign, Philip battled rebels in the Netherlands. At that time, the region includes 17 provinces that are today Belgium, the Netherlands, and Luxembourg. It was the richest part of Philip's empire. Protestants in the region resisted Philip's efforts to crush their faith. Protestants and Catholics alike opposed high taxes and autocratic Spanish rule, which threatened local traditions of self-government. In the 1560s, riots against the Inquisition sparked a general uprising in the Netherlands. Savage fighting raged for decades. In 1581, the northern, largely Protestant provinces declared their independence from Spain and became known as the Dutch Netherlands. They did not gain official recognition, however, until 1648. The southern, mostly Catholic provinces of the Netherlands remained part of the Spanish Empire. Lastly, Philip's most epic failure was the Spanish Armada. But before, let me give you a little background. Philip had a lot of troubles with his former sister-in-law, Elizabeth Tudor, since she became Queen of England. First of all, she was Protestant. She encouraged English pirates, also known as privateers or sea dogs, to attack Spanish ships. She even knighted one of them, named Francis Drake. He was known so much for privateering and looting Spanish ships. She had dared to execute Mary, Queen of Scots, in 1586 because she challenged her right to the throne. She also encouraged the Dutch against the Spain, which we just talked about. So Elizabeth had to go in Philip II's eyes. So to end English attack and subdue the Dutch, Philip prepared a huge armada or fleet against Elizabeth. This Spanish armada had 130 ships, 20,000 men, 2,400 pieces of artillery. Now, England only had 34 serviceable ships. So, the Spanish were confident of victory. "When we meet the English," predicted one Spanish commander, "God will surely arrange matters so that we can grapple and board them, either by sending some strange freak of weather or more likely just depriving the English of their wits." This prediction did not come to pass. In the English Channel, lumbering Spanish ships were outmaneuvered by the lighter, faster English ships. Strong winds also favored the English, scattering the armada. After further disasters at sea, the tattered remnants limped home in defeat. Now, the defeat of the Armada basically marks the beginning of the end of the Spanish. King Philip's response basically is, I sent the Armada against men, not God's winds and waves. The defeat of the Armada marked the beginning of the end of the Spanish power. Throughout the 1600s, Spain's strength and prosperity decreased. One reason for this decline was Philip II's successors ruled far less ably than he had. There was too much inbreeding, which left the Habsburg family having stillbirths, mental issues, and physical disabilities. For example, Charles II, who's going to be the last Habsburg to rule in Spain, descended from Joanna the Mad 14 times. That means you could trace his genealogy chart 14 different ways to Joanna the Mad from Charles II. It's weird. The family ceased to exist by the 1700s. Now, economic problems were also to blame. Costly overseas wars drained wealth out of Spain almost as fast as it came in. Treasure from the Americas led Spain to neglect farming and also commerce. The government heavily taxed the small middle class, which weakened a group that in other European nations usually supported royal power. The expulsion of Muslims and Jews from Spain also derived the economy of many skilled artisans and merchants. Finally, you have the influx of American gold and silver that leads to soaring inflation. As Spain's power dwindles in the 1600s and 1700s, you have the Dutch, you have the English, you have the French fleets, which are going to challenge and even surpass Spanish power both in Europe and around the world. Hey guys, that's all I have for the Spanish Age of Absolutism. Make sure your notes are filled out, bring them to the next class, email me with any questions, or just comment right below. Thanks guys!